What if a single breath could carry you from utter darkness into a blaze of divine light? Have you ever wondered what really happens when our breathing stops and our heart falls silent? What if one moment you're gasping for air and the next you're standing in a realm of pure love and clarity? Today's witness is Jason Janis, a 49-year-old former Catholic from Michigan, whose childhood faith was broken by abuse and who'd long ago walked away from God. On the 2nd of April, 2020, Jason collapsed at home, coughing up life-threatening amounts of blood, and died. But Jason didn't remain gone. In that fleeting instant between heartbeat and oblivion, he found himself swept into a presence so radiant and unconditional that every doubt, every wound of his past vanished in an ocean of divine embrace. What he learned in that otherworldly moment would change his life and could transform yours. Stay with Jason's story until the end. Share in the comments what you believe awaits beyond the veil. And if you feel your heart stirring, please like and subscribe, because these testimonies have the power to awaken hope, heal old hurts, and light the way home. Now, here is Jason, in his own words, on the moment he crossed over and what he saw on the other side. I remember the moment my world began to tilt, but to understand that turning point, I have to take you back to my earliest days. I was born in 1970, in an era that felt like chaos incarnate. Vietnam protests, Watergate scandals, wide-eyed fear that the world could snap at any moment. My grandparents, devout Catholics, raised me in Sunday Mass and the smell of incense. The rosary was always within reach of my small hands, and I learned to pray before I could even tie my own shoes. Yet by the time I was 7 or 8, faith felt like a fragile promise I could no longer keep. Our home was not holy ground, but a battleground. Shouts, slaps, broken dishes. I remember asking God, "If you are there, why do you let this happen to me?" The silence that answered stung worse than any blow. By 9, I turned my back on the crucifix hanging above my bed. I stopped kneeling for prayers and abandoned every Sunday ritual. Jesus became a story distant and irrelevant. For decades, I busied myself with work and routine, like stubborn Saul on the Damascus road, unaware that my heart had hardened against mercy. I refused to look for God. Fast forward to the spring of 2020. I was 49, running a small business, certain that I was invincible. Colleagues whispered about COVID-19, but in my mind it was someone else's problem. I had survived worse, I told myself, echoing the arrogance of Pharaoh, who said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?" Then came the 2nd of April. I'd spent the tail end of March dragging through a bone-deep fatigue, waking up with blood-tinged phlegm in my mouth. I assumed it was a bitten tongue thing to worry over. After work, I showered, fixed myself a simple sandwich, and collapsed onto the couch in front of the television. The next bite was the one that shattered everything. I opened my mouth and coughed no gentle hack, but a violent heave-and up shot bright, alarming blood. Not the dull maroon of old wounds, but fresh, shocking as the crimson tide of Revelation's horses. My first thought was confusion. Where did this come from? My second thought was panic. I couldn't catch a breath. I pressed a shaking hand to my throat, tasting iron. I watched in horror as my paper plate filled again and again, crimson spreading like the Red Sea of Exodus before the walls fell in. I stumbled toward the kitchen, each step a battle. My lungs felt lined with fire. Fear roared louder than any war horn. I grabbed my phone and dialed my ex-wife in RN, hoping for a lifeline. The screen lit up with a dozen missed calls. When she finally answered, her face filled with alarm. But by then my words drowned in a torrent of blood. I could barely manage. "Help." She urged me. "Lie down, Jason. That bleeding is dangerous." I slurred. "I'm so tired." And like Samson trusting his strength, I misplaced my last breath. My head fell onto the countertop, and everything went black. That was the last moment I recall in my body. No final prayer, no triumphant cry, just the end of consciousness and what felt like the beginning of everything else. When I finally came back from that abyss, it was into a world wrapped in complete darkness. Even the outlines of the ICU walls melted into a featureless void. I had no sense of time, only the relentless chorus of beeps and hisses from machines fighting to keep me alive. My eyes fluttered open to a flurry of faces racing around the bed. I felt the cold press of tubes down my throat, the bite of an IV deep in my artery, and even more catheters up my nose like the props in some medical thriller. My arms and legs were anchored to the mattress as if I were a prisoner of my own body. Voices called my name, Jason. Jason, do you know where you are? As though my identity alone could pull me back from death. I tried to answer, but my words dissolved into gasps and rattles. I turned my head toward a flickering television screen on the far wall, but behind it, a presence lingered just beyond sight. I could not see a person, only feel an overwhelming warmth and comfort, like a mother's embrace in a storm. The scene around me faded away, except for that assurance that I was not alone. I could not have imagined drowning would feel so alive. They later told me surgeons had drained almost 3 liters of blood from my lungs, enough to paint a small room scarlet, but there was nothing peaceful about choking in my own life force. On the ventilator, each breath forced into me felt like a betrayal, yet each time I gasped or convulsed, that unseen comforter stood firm like a guardian angel who never blinked. Weeks passed in that haze of intravenous drips and sedatives. I lost 75 pounds and any trace of my former strength. But every day when I awoke in that pitch-black ICU ward, I sensed that gentle presence waiting patiently beside me. It never flickered or faltered, even as I fought mind-numbing pain that would have shattered lesser wills. One afternoon, a nurse drifted in and softly asked if I wanted the television turned on. I tried to form words, but only a raspy whisper escaped. Instead, I turned my gaze toward the unseen companion in the corner and prayed silently, "Please stay." She hesitated, then quietly shut the door, letting my silent guardian remain. When they finally removed the ventilator and the tubes, I felt like someone born again. Each breath came at first like pulling air through wool. Yet with every shaky inhalation, I knew Psalm 23 had become my reality. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The body I reclaimed was fragile, but within me a fire of gratitude burned brighter than ever. Dragging myself down the hospital corridor, I understood then what Jesus meant when he said, "Whosoever loses his life for my sake shall find it." I had been plucked from the brink, cradled by a love no darkness could extinguish. From that moment on, every heartbeat reminded me that I had been given a second chance, and not just to live, but to bear witness to the presence that carried me through the night. Late one slow April afternoon, I found myself alone in that dim ICU room staring at a silent television screen. The fluorescent lights had dimmed to a dull glow, and the steady beeping of machines was my only company. Time lost all meaning. No one spoke of dates or hours as people came and went, so I simply sat there feeling the dreadful certainty that my life was slipping away. My limbs, nearly lifeless from days of illness, trembled as I summoned every ounce of willpower to prop myself up on my elbows. My arms shook violently. I had no strength to lift my own weight, and panic pressed against my chest like a vice. In that unbearable moment, I cried out to God for the first time in over 40 years. I had abandoned the faith of my childhood after the violence and neglect I endured. Yet here I was, teetering on the edge of oblivion and unable to face it alone. My voice broke as I pleaded, "God, please don't let me die here." Not because I expected thunder from heaven, but because I felt deep in my soul that a final breath meant the end of everything I had loved and fought for. I wept as though every regret I had ever known had come alive in my chest. Tears pooled in my eyes and coursed down my cheeks, each one a testament to the years I had lived without hope. I poured out a confession of every failure, every moment I had turned my back on prayer, every silent doubt that had hardened my heart like Pharaoh, refusing to let Israel go. "I'm so sorry I abandoned you and Jesus," I cried, my voice raw with remorse. In that instant, though, I saw no figure. I heard a voice gentler than any earthly whisper, yet it spoke with undeniable truth. "I never stopped loving you or believing in you." It was as if the words of Romans 8:38-39 had been breathed directly into my loathing, could separate me from that love, not even death itself. Emboldened by that promise, though still shaking, I begged on behalf of those I treasured most. "Please don't take my daughters from me," I sobbed. "I love them so much. I just want one more moment to hold their hands, to kiss them, to breathe in their laughter." I thought of my twin flame, the one whose name I could not say aloud, but whose presence in my life had transformed ordinary days into miracles. Let me hold her hand one more time. Let me feel her breath against mine. Then, in a flash brighter than any starlight, I was out of my body and soaring above the room. I looked down in an instant that felt like a lifetime all at once. I saw the rows of ICU beds, each occupied by someone fighting for breath. Doctors and nurses moved with urgent purpose, like angels in scrubs. The whole scene unfolded beneath me as clearly as if time itself had been unraveled. I understood in that trillionth of a second what I could not grasp in all my years. I saw every suffering soul below, every life hanging in the balance, and I felt a compassion so vast it eclipsed any pain I had ever known. Up there, distant from my battered flesh, I felt only pure love and light, unlike anything this world can offer. The radiance flowed through me with such intensity that any memory of my broken body was obliterated in its glow. It felt like being embraced by the very heart of the Creator, every note of Scripture becoming flesh around me. I remember John 1-5. "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And in that divine brilliance, I knew it was true. Though I felt eternal peace, an inner voice reminded me that my story was not yet finished. I could not stay in that place of pure being. My journey was not complete until I returned to the world where footsteps echo and hearts tremble with fear. As the presence that had carried me there gently guided me back, I felt myself descending. The warmth receded like the tide, leaving a single drop of dew on a blade of grass. I was laid back into my body, every cell realigning with a gas band. Then I was myself once more, lungs burning with effort, the beeping machines welcoming me back to life. In that moment, I understood the truth of Revelation 3:20. "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me." Jesus had heard my cry, and though I had turned away, he had never left my side. That late afternoon in April, I had faced death, but grace had found me in my weakness and summoned me home to a purpose far greater than simply surviving. It was the beginning of a new life, one I would never take for granted again. I felt a surge of love so vast that no words on this planet could capture its depth. It poured into me like sunlight, warming every fiber of my being. I remember opening my eyes to fields of grass so alive that each blade seemed to dance with its own heartbeat. I could see the finest ridges on every leaf, the delicate veins carrying life and light within them. I could feel the soul of that grass as clearly as I could feel my own breath. In that moment, every blade of grass was a friend welcoming me home. The trees stood tall around me, as if guarding a sacred grove. Their trunks glowed with an inner radiance, and each branch carried the memory of centuries. I saw their souls, too luminous to name. They shimmered like Obi-Wan Kenobi's spirit after his passing in Star Wars, his form wreathed in a gentle white halo of peace and truth. Those trees wrapped their arms of light around me as though delighted to greet a long-lost brother. I knew without doubt where I was and who held me. My Father God had enfolded me in his embrace. I was no longer separate, but utterly one with that boundless light, with every creature, animal, tree, blade of grass, and every star that had ever burned. or would ever burn in the vast cosmos. It happened in a single trillionth of a second, yet contained every moment of eternity. As the realization struck me, a thought crystallized within my mind, not spoken aloud, but clear as thunder. I could almost hear it in my bones. What a beautiful day to die. It was the simplest, most profound truth, as natural as slipping on a pair of warm shoes to walk a familiar path. In that sublime instant, all pain vanished. Every ache, every fear, every tear I had ever shed dissolved into the light. I felt young again, bursting with life and energy. I called it being juiced, as though some divine spark had coursed through me, electrifying every cell, until I looked down at my body and understood I did not belong there, yet a new presence joined the radiance. I could not see a face, but I knew the vibration of Yeshua Bar Yosef, Jesus Christ himself, who had come to stand beside me. He carried the same love I felt from the Father, yet in his presence, that love flowed like a river of mercy, sweeping away every regret I had carried since childhood. I had pleaded with the Father in tears for forgiveness, and he had spoken through the hush of my heart, reminding me I was never lost. Jesus spoke without words, filling me instead with the living truth of John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Every cell of my being answered, Amen, as I realized the journey before me was not over. I was meant to return to carry this light back into a world dimmed by sorrow and fear. In that swirl of perfect love and radiant truth, I knew I was truly home, and yet I was called to live once more to share the love that had saved me beyond death itself. I felt a wave of emotion wash over me, like nothing I had ever known on this side of life. It was as if every word I had ever spoken was crude compared to the pure language of feeling that surrounded me. On that other side, there was no need for letters or grammar, only direct knowing and instantaneous thought. In that timeless realm, I understood that creation, learning, and love flow together without barrier. Time did not exist there, so I have no idea whether I hovered in that ocean of light for moments or days, but every instant was filled with the most profound sense of belonging. During that embrace, I felt the love of the universe pouring through every fiber of my being. I felt my Father's unending compassion and the gentle mercy of Yeshua as if they were one presence guiding me. Then I became aware of two hands, warm as sunlit skin, resting on my chest. Their touch was tender yet insistent, and I realized they were guiding my essence gently back into my body. I no longer thought of myself as a soul, but as pure consciousness returning to this vessel that I had left behind. I felt a gentle push, as if supported by love itself, and then I was drawn back into my body. I could feel the weight of my limbs as I lay back on the hospital bed, and then everything went dark. I awoke to urgent voices calling my name. I blinked against the bright lights and turned toward the television on the wall where just moments before I had seen the presence of light now vanished. Faces of doctors and nurses filled my vision, and their voices trembled as they asked if I was all right. In that moment, I felt a pang of sorrow because I knew what they could not imagine. I had walked beyond death and felt the embrace of eternal love. But how could I explain that truth to them without fear or misunderstanding? As I lay there struggling to find my voice, I realized my life would never be the same. I remember the moment I first opened my eyes in that darkened ICU room as if it were yesterday yet, a lifetime ago. I awoke to a symphony of beeps and murmurs, so relentless they felt like the heartbeat of another world. My throat was strangled by a tube and my nose ached from another. The catheter in my artery throbbed every second. I tried to move, but my wrists and ankles were bound so tightly I could shift no more than an inch. Panic bloomed in my chest as I realized I was utterly helpless. Around me, a dozen doctors crowded like shadows in a cave, their faces blurred by the haze of pain, but their urgent voices pierced through the fog. Jason, do you know where you are? Who is the president? Their questions tumbled over each other, but I could answer none. Instead, I turned my head toward the only point of focus in the room. A flickering television mounted high on the wall cast a lonely circle of light in that endless darkness. And there, in that corner by the ceiling, I felt it again. A presence so warm and familiar, it felt like an embrace from the sun itself. I could not see a face or form, yet I sensed a being watching over me with unfathomable love and compassion. The pain in my lungs felt as though each breath seared my insides like the biblical furnace that tested Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel 3. Yet, unlike their trial in the flames, I was alone in that inferno. No fourth figure stood beside me to share the agony, only my own ragged gasps and the unwavering presence overhead. That gentle watcher never shifted throughout the weeks. I lay tethered to machines. I could not count the days nor the nights. Time lost, meaning as nurses came and went like pilgrims to a sacred shrine. Each visit they asked if I wanted the television turned on, but how could I explain that my eyes were fixed not on a screen but on a light no one else could see? I would shake my head and stare straight ahead as if nothing extraordinary were unfolding. The mechanics of survival carried on around me. Nurses weaned me from the ventilator, and doctors removed tubes one by one, but my body had grown foreign. I had lost nearly 75 pounds, and every movement left me trembling as though I had returned from the grave itself. The world beyond my window remained unchanged, but inside me, a profound transformation had already begun. I sensed my flesh as a fragile vessel and yearned for the timeless realm I had glimpsed. I did not feel dead, but suspended between two realms, a living ghost haunted by memories of agony and moments of sublime peace that no human word could capture. If anyone ever told me drowning was serene, I would have laughed. They pumped nearly 3 liters of blood from my lungs, enough to fill a baptismal font, yet it did not cleanse me. Instead, the pain clawed at my throat like Leviathan itself, Job 41. Yet, in the midst of that storm, the presence remained constant, never wavering, never leaving for a single instant. Once, in the quiet of an afternoon, I felt a hush fall over the room, as if the universe itself paused to breathe, and I knew with absolute certainty I was about to die. All the fear and regret I had buried since childhood surged up in one terrifying wave. My body shook uncontrollably as I dragged myself onto my elbows, fighting gravity and exhaustion. The effort was monumental, as though each muscle had forgotten how to obey. In that raw moment, I cried out. I begged the heavens for mercy. It was the first time in 40 years I had uttered my long-forgotten prayers to God. I apologized. I confessed my abandonment of the one who crafted me with his hands. I wept for my daughters, my twin flame, the people I loved, and I feared leaving them behind. No sooner had the words left my lips than my awareness leapt from my flesh. I found myself hovering at the ceiling above that sterile bed. Each detail of the ICU snapped into razor clarity. I saw every tube, every bead of sweat, every flicker of monitoring light, but I felt none of that suffering. Instead, I was bathed in an all-encompassing love, so powerful it reshaped my soul. I merged with the radiant light that pulsed with the heartbeat of the cosmos, and I became one with the Father whose love underpins all creation. 1 John 4-8. In that single instant, I saw the living tapestry of life, from blade of grass to beating heart. I perceived the soul of each tree, like Obi-Wan Kenobi's ethereal form glowing with peace. Each blade of grass shimmered with a vitality, emerald and infinite. I felt the pulse of nature, as though it were my own blood coursing through my veins. The light whispered without words, "You are home," and home knows no sorrow nor limitation. Time ceased to exist until I stood at the edge of that boundless love, knowing my return was not yet meant to be. Like Elijah carried by the whirlwind, 2 Kings 2:11, I hovered between heaven and earth until 2 strong hands placed on my chest drew me back. Each touch was warm as summer sunlight, gently guiding me into the vessel I had once called my prison. The fragility of that flesh contrasted with the majesty I had just known. Back on the bed, I opened my eyes to frantic faces. My rescuers called my name like echoes of a prayer. I reached for the corner where the television had stood, but the presence had vanished. In its place lay the weight of my human form and a profound longing to return to the greater reality. My discharge felt like stealing a leaf from the tree of life. I walked out into the world stunned and fragile. The love I carried from that other realm sustained me, but also plunged me into a deep darkness. For months, I drifted in depression, mourning the loss of that perfect freedom, like Lazarus torn from the tomb. John 11:43-44. I had returned among the living only to find my true home had been left behind. Yet in the crucible of that despair, a new purpose took root. My body grew weaker as my spirit grew stronger. I began to perceive angels in the corner of my vision and hear their gentle counsel like a chorus of unseen psalmists. Over meals, I would find myself recounting visions of archangels guiding me through cosmic corridors. Stories I dared not share until now, but stories that stoked a flame within me. My ascension began in earnest, as I embraced the very flesh I had once despised. I discovered that the sacred spark within me could ignite compassion in others. I spoke of the love that transcends life and death and saw hope rekindled in weary hearts. I knew then I had been restored not merely to live, but to bear witness to the truth that death is but the threshold to the boundless love of God. Now, each dawn is an invitation to serve that love. I walk this earth no longer as a man haunted by pain, but as a messenger fired by the light I experienced beyond the veil. Please share your thoughts below, and if you too have walked through darkness into the dawn, lean into that purpose. For we are all called to carry the flame of divine love into every corner of this world. I had always been raised Catholic, yet after everything I saw and felt, that old identity shattered like a broken chalice, standing at the foot of my bed in my modest room, I realized nothing would ever be the same. I stared at the ceiling as memories of that overwhelming presence flooded back. My heart pounded with a mixture of anger, grief, and awe. I raised my fist trembling toward the sky and shouted, "You picked the wrong person. You should have chosen a pope or a bishop, someone worthy of the boundless love I encountered beyond the veil." The stillness that followed was deeper than any silence I had ever known. Then a voice filled the room, gentle yet commanding, softer than a whisper, yet more powerful than thunder. It did not echo, it simply was. "Why not you? You are my son." The words struck me like lightning. I collapsed to my knees, arms outstretched as if I could embrace the very heavens above. A warmth as radiant as the morning sun washed through me, melting away the shards of doubt. I did not understand how I could speak those words with such certainty, and yet they resonated like truth itself. For all that I am you. That declaration marked the true beginning of my journey. My body had been healed in the days that followed, the tubes removed, the machines silenced, and the breaths regained. But my soul had only just begun to awaken. I found myself walking through life with new eyes, each moment charged with purpose. The morning coffee tasted like redemption. The sunrise felt like a promise. Every act of kindness became a sacrament. Every quiet moment, a chance to listen. My ascension has not been effortless. There were days when I stumbled under the weight of old fears, when loneliness threatened to drag me back into that hole of despair. Yet each time I faltered, I felt that same unwavering love guiding me back, stronger than any doubt. I have encountered visions of archangels, gentle guides, who spoke in melodies, unbound by words and moments of stillness, in which the divine presence was as close as my own breath. My near-death experience was not merely a brush with heaven. It was a summons to remember who I truly am and why I was sent here. I came back to share that love, to remind every soul that the kingdom of light is already within us, even when the night seems endless. If these words stir something in you, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Let us walk this path of awakening together. We dwell in the greatest love story ever written, yet so many have forgotten their part in it. Take my hand, and let us remember who we are, why we came here, and how deeply we are loved. May this truth guide your steps and ignite your own journey of rediscovery. As I look back on that journey from the ICU bed to the very edge of eternity, I see a simple, unshakable truth emerge. Every life is a miracle forged in light and shadow. Every moment of doubt, every act of kindness, every tear and every laugh writes the story of who we really are. I have learned that pain can become a portal to compassion, that fear can be transformed into courage, and that love is the only force capable of shattering the prison of our own making. Today I carry that revelation into each sunrise, aware that every heartbeat is a chance to choose light over darkness. Each morning I whisper a prayer of gratitude for the gift of this life and for the unseen presence that never abandoned me. I invite you now to pause and ask yourself what you believe about love, about purpose, about what awaits beyond the end of breath. If you have felt the stirrings of something greater, if your heart has ever trembled at the thought of the unknown, share your experience below. Let us build a circle of trust where every voice matters and every story can shine a beacon of hope. To those who have walked through the valley of the shadow of death and returned to tell the tale, know that you are not alone. Your testimony is a bridge spanning worlds and a lifeline to souls still searching. May these words remind you that miracles are real, that home is not a distant dream, but a presence you carry within. May the power of these testimonies awaken in you the courage to embrace your own story and to live each day in the wonder of infinite love.